3.5 centuries ago, the Speaker denied the King his way in the Commons. Today, the present Speaker admitted the police had raided the place without even having a warrant. Tonight, even the most worldly politicians gasped at the admission that officials had allowed the police to raid an MP's office in the Palace of Westminster. The Speaker of the House of Commons blamed the Sergeant-at-Arms. Is ignorance an excuse?
I was not told that the police did not have a warrant. Order.
Tonight, the Leader of the House of Commons declines to take the opportunity to declare her confidence in the current Speaker.
Because it's not a question of whether I do or don't have confidence in anybody, it's his office, and I'm supporting that office of Speaker. That's my responsibility of Leader of the House.
The government promises comfort for those who can't pay their mortgages. Is it anything like as ambitious as the hype and the headlines?
We will do everything in our power that no hard-working family who demonstrates to their bank a willingness to pay, that they can or should face the fear of repossession of their family home.
And is the Obama presidency in danger of looking like the third term that Bill Clinton never had? Good evening. It's supposed to be one of the biggest days in the political year. But for all the pomp and flummery of the state opening, the thing that's most exercised our lawmakers wasn't the long-planned, regular arrival in Westminster of the Queen, but the unplanned, irregular, and as it turned out, unresisted arrival of the police in an MP's office. The Speaker blamed the Sergeant-at-Arms, who it turns out hadn't even asked whether the police had a warrant. They hadn't. Michael Crick reports.
Outside Westminster Hall, a statue of Oliver Cromwell. In his day, of course, one of the historic champions of the rights of Parliament and ordinary MPs against an overbearing state. But today, the rather less well-known figures who now carry that burden of protecting such rights came under fire from MPs. The Speaker, Michael Martin, and the newly appointed Sergeant-at-Arms, Jill Pay, who were responsible for letting the police enter the Commons to search Damien Green's office last week. The words,
"Close the door,"
in today's ceremony were actually said by Jill Pay in memory of the days when troublesome MPs often risked arrest by the Crown. Many MPs believe she and Speaker Martin should have said just the same thing to the police last week. And when the ceremonial black rod finally got into the chamber, the Labour MP Dennis Skinner had a question for him.
Any Tory moles at the palace?
Mr Skinner's quip reflected a fear among Labour MPs that the Conservatives now have moles everywhere. But it also showed how this affair overshadowed a big, set-piece political event. Indeed, Prince Philip, passing Jack Straw on his way out, seemed to mime grabbing the speech from the bag and throwing it away. And this afternoon's debate on the speech was preceded by a statement by Michael Martin explaining what happened last week.
At 7 a.m. on Thursday, police called upon the Sergeant-at-Arms and explained the background to the case and disclosed to the Sergeant the identity of the member. The Sergeant-at-Arms called me, told me the member's name, and said that a search might take place of his offices in the House. I was not told that the police did not have a warrant. Order.
Warrants will be required in future, he said. MPs can debate the affair on Monday, and 7 senior members will review what happened.
I must make it clear to the House that I was not asked the question of whether consent should be given or whether a warrant should have been insisted on. I did not personally authorise the search. It was later...
In short, he seemed to blame Mrs. Pay and the police. But the details of who did what and whether there should have been a warrant all divert from the much bigger issue of whether it's right to arrest an MP pursuing his parliamentary duties. Then that MP spoke.
An MP endangering national security would be a disgrace. An MP exposing embarrassing facts about Home Office policy, which ministers are hiding, is doing a job in the public interest. The day when exposing facts which ministers would prefer to keep hidden becomes a crime will be a bad day for democracy in this country.
But the former Labour Home Secretary John Reid insisted there were several principles at stake.
The first of those, of course, is the rights and privileges of members of Parliament. But the second is the principle that outside of those particular rights and privileges, we are all, as citizens of this country, subject to the law as well. Thirdly, that whether or not ministers should have been consulted, that the principle of the independent operations of the police is reasserted in all of these.
Only one Labour member, though, expressed his complete outrage to the Speaker.
All that you have said makes me all the more convinced that what took place, the raid, the arrest of the honourable member, was totally without any justification whatsoever. That it was, sir, a breach of parliamentary convention.
Only a few hours earlier, the party leaders fulfilled the convention of exchanging pleasantries as they walked together to hear the Queen's speech. Now, it was back to normal hostilities.
Parliament is here to call the government to account, to question, to challenge and to publish information that is in the public interest. That is why we're here. Isn't that what, I'll give way in a moment, isn't that what the ceremony this morning is all about? When we slam the door in the face of the Queen's representative and assert the right of the public to challenge the government and to know the truth about the government, the country we live in, that is Parliament doing its job.
Mr. Speaker, I notice they don't want to talk about the economy. Well, that's absolutely true. Let me say I uphold the right of members of Parliament to pursue their duties in a way that is necessary for the public interest. But I think he's got to understand that what the Acting Commissioner of the Police has said today is that what they're investigating is a substantial series of leaks from the Home Office, potentially involving national security.
Several times Mr. Brown was asked if he agreed with the Speaker that there should have been a warrant. Several times, amid uproar, he wouldn't say. What's happened today is that this story has become a lot more party political. It was notable how over the weekend several Labour MPs expressed their outrage, and yet today some of them have rather softened their line. One reason, I think, is that last night the Conservatives invited the cameras in to film the shadow cabinet with Mr. Green, and they were seen laughing together and, in the words of one Conservative commentator, looking far too cocky about the affair. Then, this morning, things were hardened when Peter Mandelson weighed in and accused the Conservatives of colluding with a civil servant to break the law. As Parliament awaits a statement tomorrow by the Home Secretary, the questions remain. When can the police take action against MPs? Are there limits on when officials can leak material, especially if they have political motivations or if the leaks have been solicited?